There we go. I love telling stories about my granny. She was a really important figure in my life growing up. Oh, it's super muddy. Make your way around that, Margot. Ooh. One of my memories of Granny is she had a little poodle called Andy. Oh look, which way shall we go? These gloves have been here for weeks and weeks. Do you think it's a sign of something? You know, Granny loved her poodle, and her little dog was such a good friend to her. Hey pup, where should we go? Granny bought a whole length of chain. It was the kind of chain you find on a sink plug, and she bought a whole reel of it with the idea that she could have Andy on a chain and he could run around and so forth. Anyway, she picked me up from school one day, and Granny actually had a little mini estate with the wood panels on it. It was a Mini Clubman, and she picked me up and I jumped in the Mini, and Andy jumped on my lap and we drove off. Are we okay coming through here, or shall we go another way? It's got too muddy here. Let's go a different way. We'll head back to some other fields. The thing about Granny was, I don't think Granny ever took a driving test. I think she got it somehow during the war, and she had her own interesting way of driving the car. She used to use loads of high revs. Then she'd let the clutch out suddenly. Quite often the wheels would skid a bit, or if it was gravel or something, it would stir up all the loose stones. Anyway, she picked me up from school and we were driving home. And as she pulled up to this crossroads on the way, Andy jumped out of the window off my side. He literally leapt out. Of course, the chain unraveled and I had the end, and I started shouting, "Granny, Granny, stop! Andy's jumped!" But Granny was quite hard of hearing too, and focused on the high revs at the engine. She crossed the crossroads, and I looked out of the window, and the chain went round the rear wheel of the car, and I could see it quickly winding up. I'm shouting, "Granny, stop! Granny, stop!" And all of a sudden she stops, and I leap out of the car, and honestly, Andy's head is 2 or 3 inches away from the wheel. He nearly died. He got squashed and went round and round the wheel. You can't bear to think. So I carefully unwound the chain, picked up Andy and got back in the car, and I said to Granny, look what's happened. Look what's happened. And she looked at me, and all the chain links that had got wrapped around the wheel had then been pulled flat. And I said, "Look, Granny, look what's happened to the chain. It's stretched it, it's flat." And she looked at me and she went, "Oh well, no harm done, and at least we've got a longer chain now," and revved the engine and took off. Just like Margot is heading back already. It's not time to go back, darling. And instead of freaking out, instead of going into a state of inner turmoil, she just had this fantastic sense of grace that no harm had happened today, and she could even find a benefit in it, that the chain was longer. And I've often thought about that, thought about how valuable that is as a life skill. Let's go up. When I think back over stories like that and different events from my background, whilst it's amusing and the events are funny, it makes me realise that people are learning from our reactions to things. And so much of what we communicate is how we react. We don't have to think the same. We don't need to all be on the same page about everything. In fact, it's absurd to think that we will. But the way we respond to each other's worldview changes everything. Sometimes when we come down here, we'll see a deer and Margot will chase after them. Quite clearly she's not going to manage to do anything, and they run so fast. They're off like the wind. Her little legs are not really that fast. I guess we're all looking for people to encourage us, show us how to live this life differently. We're not expecting them to have all the answers or have everything right, but we do need their reassurance. And Granny was kind to me, and I valued that very much.